Hey Reddit, this is a wild story I never thought I'd have to tell. It's been a roller coaster, and even though it's over now, I still feel like I'm piecing together how I let things get so far. It all started with something as mundane as cleaning out old email accounts, but what I found changed everything. Let me introduce myself. I'm Chris, 27, and like a lot of people, I've had several random email accounts since high school. You know the ones. Made to sign up for free trials, enter giveaways, or avoid spam cluttering your main inbox. Most of them were abandoned after a while, forgotten in the depths of the internet. Last week, I decided to clean house. I was tired of having so many unused accounts tied to my name. Most were full of spam, fake sweepstakes, expired coupons, and endless newsletters I never subscribed to. It was tedious, but I figured I'd delete them and move on. Then I opened one account I hadn't touched in years and saw something strange. Among the junk was a folder labeled Important. I don't remember ever flagging anything, so I was curious. Inside, I found 14 emails, all from the same person. The sender used a cryptic address, something generic and untraceable like XRS2029ABC. The subject lines were just as unsettling. Please help me. I don't know who else to ask, and this is my last email. They were dated over 3 years ago, and every single one was unopened. I couldn't ignore them. My hands trembled as I opened the first email. It started vague, someone claiming to be an old childhood friend, saying they were in trouble and had no one else to turn to. The tone was desperate, almost panicked. I kept reading, each email growing more intense than the last. They talked about feeling isolated, struggling with an illness, and begging me to respond. Then came the last email. Its subject line was stark. I guess you'll never reply. It doesn't matter now. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. That one sent chills down my spine. It felt so final, so raw, and I couldn't believe I had missed it for so long. My first instinct was to assume it was spam or a phishing attempt, but the emails were deeply personal. They referenced specific details about my life, things no stranger could know. They mentioned my high school hobbies, the time I broke my arm in gym class, and even the nickname a few bullies used to tease me. Whoever sent these emails wasn't just a random scammer. They knew me, and they knew me well. I didn't recognize the writing style or the email address. If this person was a childhood friend, why wouldn't they just say their name? Why all the mystery? And if they were telling the truth, had I missed a genuine cry for help? I couldn't shake the guilt. What if someone had really needed me, and I had ignored them? What if they weren't lying about the illness? Or worse, what if they had followed through on that ominous final email? My head was spinning, and I knew I couldn't let this go. I had to figure out who had sent those emails. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. The email address gave no hints. It was a string of random letters and numbers. I tried to think back to high school, but nothing clicked. The details in the emails felt both familiar and eerie, as if someone had been watching me for years. Feeling overwhelmed, I called my friend Alex. Alex is one of those tech-savvy types who can find anything online. I explained the situation, and he was intrigued. "You sure this isn't some elaborate scam?" he asked. "No way," I said. "This is way too specific. Whoever wrote this knows things only someone from my past could." Alex agreed to help. He started digging, trying to trace the email address and find any connections. It felt like we were unraveling a mystery from a detective novel. Hours turned into days, and just when I was starting to think we'd hit a dead end, Alex called me back. "Chris, I found something," he said. "The emails were sent from an IP address registered to a house in your old neighborhood. Guess who lived there?" My stomach dropped. "Who?" I asked, bracing myself. "Jake," Alex said. "Jake." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Back in high school, Jake was that guy, the class clown who crossed the line more often than not. He was a bully, the type who thrived on making other people miserable. He once poured soda into my backpack for no reason other than his twisted sense of humor. The thought of Jake being behind the emails didn't make sense at first. Why would he reach out to me after all these years? Why pretend to be in trouble? But the more I thought about it, the more it added up. Jake had always loved a good prank, and the more elaborate, the better. Suddenly, what had felt like a genuine cry for help started to look like another one of Jake's games. But why? We hadn't spoken since high school. Why would he go to such lengths to mess with me after all this time? I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. The more I thought about Jake, the angrier I became. If he was behind those emails, it meant he had gone to ridiculous lengths to mess with me for no reason other than his own amusement. I hadn't seen or spoken to him in years. Why would he care enough to pull something so elaborate and cruel? I called Alex again. "Can we confirm it's him?" I asked. "Give me some time," Alex replied, his voice calm but determined. "I'll dig deeper." Hours later, Alex came through. He managed to link the cryptic email address to an old online forum. Most of the posts were nonsense, ramblings, and random comments, but one post caught Alex's attention. It was signed with a username that was all too familiar, Jake's. Back in high school, Jake used the same username for everything, from his gaming accounts to his terrible YouTube channel. Seeing it there, tied to the emails, was the final piece of the puzzle. It had to be him. I stared at the evidence, my blood boiling. This wasn't just a prank. It was a twisted, calculated attempt to get inside my head. And for what? A laugh? To see if I'd fall for it? I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Alex and I came up with a plan. If Jake wanted to play games, we'd play along, but on my terms. The first step was to confirm he was still living at his parents' house. A quick search revealed that, yes, Jake hadn't moved out. It was almost laughable. Here he was, still stuck in the same place, pulling childish stunts like he was back in high school. The next step was baiting him. Alex helped me spoof an email address that looked official, something like Community Outreach Network. The message was short and professional. "Dear Jake, our organization recently received inquiries about your participation in anonymous pen pal programs. We believe there may have been a breach of confidentiality and would like to discuss this matter further. Please reply with your availability. Thank you. Community Support Team." We didn't have to wait long. 2 hours later, Jake replied, "What the hell? I didn't sign up for anything like that. Who's asking about me?" His defensiveness was all the confirmation I needed. But I wasn't done yet. Alex helped me draft another email, this time dropping subtle hints about the prank. "Dear Jake, we've received specific details about emails sent from your account, including references to personal events from the recipient's past. We'd like to clarify the intent behind these messages and ensure no further misunderstandings arise. Thank you, Community Support Team." This one hit a nerve. Less than an hour later, Jake cracked. "Okay, fine. It was me. Jesus, calm down. It was a joke, all right? A stupid prank. I didn't think you'd ever see them." A joke. My fists clenched as I read those words. Who in their right mind thinks faking a cry for help and pretending to die is funny? I wanted to explode, to call him out directly and make him feel the same humiliation and anger he had caused me. But Alex stopped me. "Be smart about this," Alex said. "If you blow up, he'll play the victim. Let's do this the right way." And so we did. Alex and I gathered everything. The emails, Jake's confession, and even some screenshots from his public social media accounts where he bragged about his pranks. It didn't take long to find more dirt. Jake was still trying to make it as a YouTube prankster, posting mean-spirited stunts that barely got any views. It was clear Jake hadn't changed. If anything, he was doubling down on the same behavior that made him unbearable in high school. Instead of confronting him directly, I decided to let his actions speak for themselves. I anonymously posted the evidence in a private Facebook group for our high school alumni. I didn't name Jake outright, but anyone who remembered him could easily connect the dots. The response was immediate. People started tagging each other, commenting things like, "Of course it's Jake," and sharing their own stories of his bullying. Someone even found a link to his YouTube channel, and it wasn't long before his videos were flooded with comments calling him out. The best part? I forwarded the emails and his confession to his parents. I didn't know what to expect, but a day later, I got a long email from his mom. She apologized profusely, claiming they had no idea what Jake had been up to and assuring me they would handle it. Apparently, Jake was grounded. Yes, grounded. As if he were still a teenager. Meanwhile, Jake's reputation was falling apart. The small YouTubers he had collaborated with started cutting ties, citing unprofessional behavior. His subscriber count plummeted, and his channel became a magnet for angry comments. All the years he had spent trying to build an online presence unraveled in a matter of days. It felt like justice. For once, Jake wasn't getting away with his actions. But even as I watched his downfall, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had one prank spiraled so far out of control? I thought it was over. I thought Jake had finally learned his lesson, but as I was about to find out, he wasn't ready to give up just yet. After the alumni group post went live, the fallout for Jake was swift and brutal. People who had been silent about him for years suddenly had a lot to say. The group exploded with comments, stories, and screenshots. It wasn't just about the prank emails, this was years of resentment boiling over. I knew it had to be Jake, one person wrote, recounting a time when he had humiliated them during a school assembly. Another chimed in, he poured soda on my homework once and told me it was performance art. The more stories I read, the more I realized I wasn't alone in feeling targeted. Jake's antics had left a trail of burned bridges and hurt feelings that stretched far beyond me. And now it was all coming back to haunt him. Someone in the group shared a link to Jake's YouTube channel. His latest video, a poorly edited prank where he scared people at a park with fake bugs, became a battlefield. The comment section filled with accusations, roasts, and a general consensus that Jake needed to grow up. Wow, pretending to die for attention? That's a new low, even for you, one comment read. This guy's been a jerk since high school. Guess some things never change, wrote another. The hits just kept coming. Jake's subscriber count started plummeting, and the few collaborators he had left began distancing themselves. One even posted a statement saying they had no idea about the emails and didn't condone his behavior. It was clear Jake's attempts to build an online persona as a prankster were crumbling. But the best part? The email I got from his mom. She apologized profusely for Jake's behavior, saying she and his dad were horrified by what they had learned. "We didn't raise him to act like this," she wrote. "We've grounded him and are taking steps to address this situation." Grounded. A grown man in his late 20s was being grounded. If it weren't so ridiculous, I might have laughed. Still, it felt good to know his parents were finally holding him accountable. For a while, it seemed like Jake had gone quiet. His YouTube uploads stopped, his social media accounts went dark, and no more emails came through. I started to think maybe he had finally gotten the message. But then, a week later, I got an email from Jake himself. Not from the prank account, but his personal one. "I can't believe you'd ruin my life over a joke," he wrote, starting a rant that stretched for paragraphs. He blamed me for the backlash, accused me of overreacting, and painted himself as the victim. According to Jake, I was the one who had gone too far. He even claimed I had ruined his career, as if scaring strangers with bad pranks counted as a career. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say to someone so unwilling to take responsibility for their actions. But Jake wasn't done. Over the next few days, he tried reaching out through every platform he could think of. Text messages, social media DMs, even LinkedIn. I blocked him everywhere. Then, the final twist, Jake tried to spin everything into a redemption arc. He uploaded a new YouTube video titled, "I Messed Up, Here's the Truth." Out of morbid curiosity, I watched it. The video was everything you'd expect from someone like Jake. He started with a half-hearted apology, but it quickly turned into him blaming me for exaggerating and accusing the alumni group of cancel culture. He claimed the emails were just a joke and that people were overreacting. It was a masterclass in missing the point. The comment section didn't buy it. "If this is your idea of taking accountability, no wonder everyone's done with you," one comment said. "Apologizing while still blaming everyone else? Classic Jake," wrote another. It didn't take long for the video to backfire. People who hadn't known about the prank emails before now knew the full story, and Jake's reputation sank even further. He eventually deleted the video, but the damage was already done. Meanwhile, my life started moving in a different direction. Sarah, an old classmate who had reached out after seeing the alumni group post, became an unexpected source of support. We bonded over our shared experiences with Jake's bullying, and what started as casual messages turned into long conversations. Before I knew it, we were meeting up for coffee and reminiscing about high school. Not the bad parts, but the good moments we had managed to hold on to despite everything. Jake, on the other hand, couldn't seem to let go. A mutual acquaintance told me he was trying to pitch new prank ideas to one of his few remaining collaborators, but they shut him down immediately. His reputation had become so toxic that even the people who once tolerated him wanted nothing to do with him. Then came another surprising email, this time from Jake's dad. "I want to apologize for my son's behavior," it read. "We've taken steps to address this and ensure he doesn't bother you again. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." It was short but genuine, and it felt like the closure I didn't know I needed. Jake had always gotten away with everything growing up, but now, for the first time, he was facing real consequences. Knowing his parents were holding him accountable gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. For weeks, things were quiet. No more emails, no more messages, no more chaos. I thought that was the end of it. But life has a funny way of surprising you, and the next twist was just around the corner. Weeks passed, and life started to settle. Jake had gone completely silent. No more emails, no more desperate attempts to justify himself, no more videos trying to salvage his reputation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about him constantly. I was finally able to focus on moving forward. Sarah and I had grown closer. What started as a shared frustration over Jake had turned into something unexpectedly sweet. We found ourselves spending more time together, sharing stories, and laughing over the ridiculousness of high school. Being around her made it easier to let go of the anger and resentment I'd carried for years. Jake was becoming a distant memory. Then one evening, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said cautiously. There was a pause before a voice I hadn't heard in years came through the line. "Hey, Chris, it's Jake." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My first instinct was to hang up. After everything he'd put me through, what could he possibly have to say? But something about his tone stopped me. It wasn't the cocky, self-assured voice I remembered from high school. This was different, hesitant, almost apologetic. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from." He started, his voice low and uncertain. "But I need to say something." I didn't interrupt. I just let him talk. Jake launched into a speech I never thought I'd hear. He apologized. Really apologized. Not the half-hearted, blame-shifting nonsense from his YouTube video, but a genuine admission of guilt. He started with the prank emails, acknowledging how cruel and unnecessary they were. He admitted that he'd done it for attention, not thinking about how it might affect me, and he owned up to how disturbing the whole thing must have been from my perspective. But he didn't stop there. Jake went on to address everything. Years of bullying, the way he'd treated people in high school, and the trail of hurt he'd left behind. He said therapy had forced him to confront things he'd avoided for years, and for the first time, he was starting to see himself clearly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. I needed to tell you that I'm sorry." His words hung in the air. For the first time in my life, Jake sounded vulnerable. He talked about how isolating it had been to realize how many bridges he'd burned, how he'd alienated almost everyone he'd ever known. He admitted that his obsession with being the funny guy had driven him to do things he wasn't proud of. And now, for the first time, he was facing the consequences. I sat there, listening in silence. Part of me wanted to tell him off, to remind him of all the pain he'd caused. But another part of me could hear how hard it was for him to say these things. Jake, the guy who had built his entire identity around being untouchable, was finally breaking down the walls he'd spent his life hiding behind. When he finished, there was a long pause. I could tell he was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what to say. His apology didn't erase the past, but it felt real. It wasn't something I ever expected to get, and it left me conflicted. Eventually, I spoke. "Jake, I appreciate the apology. I really do. But you have to understand, it's not that simple. Years of hurt don't just go away because someone says they're sorry." "I know," he replied quietly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I needed to say it." The call ended shortly after that. I sat there for a long time, replaying his words in my head. I didn't feel the same anger I used to. Instead, there was a strange sense of relief. Jake's apology didn't fix everything, but it felt like a step in the right direction for both of us. A shift in perspective. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about Jake less and less. The anger I'd carried for so long started to fade. Not because I'd forgiven him completely, but because I realized I didn't need to carry that burden anymore. His actions, his choices, they weren't my responsibility. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward. Meanwhile, news about Jake continued to trickle in. His YouTube channel was gone, his social media accounts wiped clean. A mutual acquaintance told me he'd taken a job at a local car wash, far from the fame he'd once chased. Sarah and I joked about it one day, but her words stuck with me. People like Jake have to live with themselves. That's a punishment all its own. As for me, life was finally moving in the right direction. I started reconnecting with old classmates, not to rehash the past, but to rebuild relationships I'd lost over the years. My connection with Sarah deepened, and before I knew it, we were spending most of our free time together. She made me feel grounded, reminding me that the best way to heal was to focus on the good in my life. Jake's apology didn't fix everything, but it gave me closure. For the first time in years, I felt like I could let go of the resentment and pain that had weighed me down. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, choosing to move forward. That chapter of my life was finally closed, and I was ready to start a new one.